I want to speak to faith this morning because I'm not really feeling it. And I haven't been for some time. Through the pandemic, I completely stayed away from my home church in Jacksonville as people were doing things on screens, and I didn't feel that was a pulpity environment for me. But in addition to that, part of me has not only felt I don't feel it about faith, part of me has had an outright suspicion that my native faith might not be what's called at this point in my life or my world. I am someone who is temperamentally much more a Tigger than an Eeyore. I am by nature inclined toward enthusiasm, a certain level of credulity, romanticism, idealism, and certainly a sense that things will be fine. I'm a natural optimist. Faith, I think, is not just a matter of anything like optimism, and I think for many people, faith is what is most important in the times that are the hardest. Yet I have not, in my life, experienced the kinds of hardships that are sung to in that song, My Life Goes On an Endless Song. And so for me, what seems to be called for is not just a way of getting back to where I was, but even in some sense a way of rediscovering faith. So for me, I would say that my nature holds faith. Natural faith, as opposed to a creedal faith, let's say, is faith in the nature of things. The pattern of things may not be favorable now, but things are such that, and your nature is such that, ultimately you will be okay. So when my faith is displaced, I am not my natural self. And myself is out of joint with nature. To rediscover faith is not just to return to how it was, to reconnect, to rejoin. To discover is to see something new, at least a new perspective. And discovery, I believe, has to venture into the unknown, or at least what is as yet, in some important respect, unknown. So, in working out this sermon, I began by honoring my mood of doubt. My I'm not feeling it, even my suspicion. And I set out to find a way toward and into faith, not just to go back to how it was before, not to be who I was before, but to discover faith out of its absence as if for the first time. Some of you know that among our many sources, my origins were in Christianity, but in adolescence I took a great interest in Asian philosophy. And much of my thought is steeped in the complementarity of yin and yang. So those of you who know next to nothing about Chinese philosophy are probably at least familiar with this symbol, and maybe with the notion of yin as the principle of yielding and yang as the active or creative principle. I was very much in a yin sort of, I'm receptive, it's dark, we'll see where this goes. And it occurred to me to throw the coins and look to the I Ching, the oldest Chinese classic of wisdom, built on those complementary principles. So 3 nights in a row, Thursday, Friday, and last night, I threw my coins. And the way that works is that the I Ching is built up of 64 different hexagrams, 6 lines. Each of those is 2 trigrams. And the 8 trigrams that make up the system are the elemental forces and principles in nature. And so by combining 2 of the elemental forces in nature, you have a distinctive characteristic that holds sway then. There's only one other thing you need to know about how the yin and yang interactions work in this mathematical system. In fact, Leibniz derived a legitimate binary number system when he was shown one of the sequencings of the I Ching. Anyway, the only other thing you need to know about how this works is that when you're using a coin, I use tails would be yin and heads would be yang, but when you throw 3 coins, if 2 of the 3 are heads, that's yang, that's an unbroken line. If 2 of the 3 are yin, the way I did it, that is a broken line. But if all 3 come up heads, you make your, in the way I did it, you make your unbroken line, but then you put a dot next to it. That's a changing line. When they all 3 come up the same way, it's a changing line. If after you've done the 6 lines of your hexagram, any of those lines have dots, you switch the lines over from broken to unbroken or unbroken to broken, which yields a new hexagram. So you first look at your situational hexagram for where things are and where they've been. Then you look at what these lines of change portend. Then you look at what the situation is pointing toward. Not as this might have been used by people for divination. That isn't what I was doing with it. I wasn't trying to predict what was going to happen. I was trying to find insight on my way in the Tao of Mark, as it were. So the first hexagram that came up is called difficulty at the beginning. And the image is of a blade of grass trying to come up through some resisting thing in the soil of the earth. A blade of grass pushes against an obstacle as it sprouts out of the earth. Teeming, chaotic, profusion, thunder and rain fill the air. A thunderstorm brings release from tension, and all things breathe freely again. Undertaking new beginnings. I'm reading from the interpretive translations of the classic text for each of the hexagrams that came up. Undertaking new beginnings. Everything is still unformed, dark. Hence, you must hold back because any premature move might bring disaster. Everything is in motion. Therefore, if one perseveres, there is prospect of great success in spite of the existing danger. Get that? Because everything is in motion. If you're able to discern and go with that motion, is the prospect of success. In order to overcome the chaos, you need helpers. Order is already implicit in the lines of chaos, so you must arrange and organize the inchoate profusion of such times of beginning. I had 3 changing lines with that. The first, hesitation and hindrance. It furthers you to remain persevering. It furthers you to appoint helpers. The third line also, whoever hunts deer without the forester loses his way in the forest. Understand the signs of the time and desist. To go on brings humiliation. The superior person renounces a wish rather than provoke failure and humiliation by trying to force its fulfillment. The fourth line was also changing. Horse and wagon part. Strive for union. To go brings good fortune. Everything acts to further. In other words, it's your duty to act, but you lack sufficient power. The horse is uncoupled from the wagon. Take the first step. Seize the opportunity to make a connection to accept help. I love that because it's not don't do anything, yet desist, but take a step that makes a connection that accepts help that may come. When I plugged in those changes, the hexagram that resulted was that of influence or wooing, which involves the pairing of the youngest son and youngest daughter. So it's the marriage of opposites that the mystics speak of. It's what came up as what is portended by the difficult beginning. It's the marriage of opposites. Influence, success. Perseverance furthers success, because all success depends on mutual attraction. Perseverance means keeping still on the outside while feeling joy within, rather than getting carried away with an excess of joy, like my Tigger self might do, right? Perseverance is also the difference in courtship, between courtship and seduction. Because perseverance is the consideration and attention for the other that extends through time in a careful and patient way that seduction does not, seduction being manipulative. This attraction is a general law of nature through which heaven and earth create all things, generate all things. So the sage influences hearts, and thus the world attains peace. The image I really like. The image of this in the characters of the hexagrams. A lake at the summit of a mountain. The image of influence. Thus, the superior one encourages people to approach them by their readiness to receive the people. Instead of the summit of the mountain jutting out in a forceful imposition on space, it's sunken where the lake is. It's yielding and receptive, and in thus its height fulfills something that the mountain without that would never do. The image counsels that we should keep our minds humble and open so they are receptive to good advice. So some movement there from difficult beginnings to the prospect of that reconciliation of opposites through the yielding at the summit. Day 2, Friday. My God, that was interesting. The first hexagram that came up has the traditional translation, darkening of the light. But in this book that I was also consulting by Mr. Wang, it's called censorship. Some of you know that I'm working on a book. Some of you know that this is where my life is trying to go. And so when I think of faith, I think of my engagement in my book, my engagement with Unitarian Universalism. Actually, I should share with you that as I was throwing these coins, the question I was focused on was, what should I share with my All Souls friends and colleagues about where my issues with faith are right now and where that might be going? In other words, what should this sermon be? 3 nights in a row, right before the sermon, right? Censorship, or the darkening of the light, is dominated by the yielding, as I'll share with you in a minute when I get through with that. Literally, it's the wounding of the bright. The sun has sunken under the earth. Here, a man of dark nature is in a position of authority and brings harm to the wise and able. I'm sure the person who had a Brandon sign up in the yard would have an interpretation of that. You are directly confronted by forces that threaten both your convictions and the attainment of your goals. Unfortunately, your position in this situation is not powerful. It will be necessary to submit to this time of personal censorship and step into the background. You must conceal your feelings. Make it a point to appear appear externally accepting of a difficult environment, it is both useless and dangerous to expound your convictions, and by doing so, you will only invite further difficulties. Do not, however, lose sight of your principles for even a single moment. You know what your goals are. It is tremendously important to maintain a fierce inner awareness of them during times when they seem most unattainable. With this attitude, you can strengthen your character and thereby put yourself in a position to transcend this formidable time. Two changing lines. The first of them, darkening of the light during flight. They lower their wings. The superior one does not eat for 3 days on their wanderings, but they have somewhere to go. The host gossips about them. With grandiose resolve, you endeavor to soar above all obstacles, but encounter a hostile fate. You retreat and evade the issue. The time is difficult. Remaining true to your principles, you suffer deprivation. Still, you have a fixed goal to strive for, even though those around you do not understand. So one of the first of those changing lines is that this is happening at a time of flight, where in my life, I'm wanting to soar above those obstacles as if, okay, it's been 2 years of this stuff, I'm ready to take off again. And this is saying, doesn't work that way. Another changing line, while striving in good faith to create order, as if by accident you come upon the leader of disorder and seize him. Thus victory is assured. But do not be too hasty in abolishing abuses, because they have been long in existence. I don't know if that's just a fantasy play coupled with some cautionary little be a gracious one. I don't know. The resulting hexagram, the second part from night before last, was natural response, the receptive. Remember, the yin, or the yielding, is the broken lines. The yang is the solid lines. Every one of my solid lines had a dot next to it. Heads only came up when they all came up. Right? They never came up as a majority, which means that when I follow the changing lines to what they're changing toward, it's all broken lines. It is the yielding, the receptive, earth. Natural response is a name given to this hexagram. It represents nature in contrast to spirit. Here I am thinking about faith, right? And it's going, bam, not spirit, but earth. Isn't that interesting? Its place in relationship to the creative principle is one of devotion. The receptive must be activated and led by the creative. Then it is productive of the good. Only when it strives to equal the creative is struggle introduced, bringing ill to both. In other words, this is not the time to seek creativity. This is not the time for spiritual strength in that sense. The receptive brings about sublime success, furthering through the perseverance of a mare, because the mare combines the strength and swiftness of a horse with the gentleness and devotion of a cow. It is favorable to find friends for the season of toil, and not favorable in seasons of reflection and reckoning. Before there was a reference to helpers. For me, when I think in terms of faith, I'm thinking in terms of faith as in a body of people, a church, a movement, right? So the friends are like, you guys. It is not your time to lead. Sorry, Jack. That would only make you lose your way. Let yourself be led. And in this next sentence, as I was writing down and slightly transcribing, slightly changing what I was finding in the books, I made a Freudian slip that is interesting and even profound, and I'm going to read it and let that stand, and then I'm going to come back and say what the book said that I miscopied. If you know how to meet faith with an attitude of acceptance, you are sure to find the right guidance. I'll say that again just as I misread it, just as I miswrote it. If you know how to meet faith with an attitude of acceptance, you are sure to find the right guidance. What the book really said, if you know how to meet fate, as in da-da-da-da. So in just writing it down, with faith being what I was looking toward, so in some respects, fate and faith are the opposites. Fate is what cannot be moved, and faith is the somehow impossible belief that anything will move through that. So that even if it's not faith in the sense that it comes from me, even if it's a faith in forces and powers and resources beyond me, faith is still in some sense the opposite of faith. But what this contradiction in my transcription is bringing out is that if I meet fate, if I meet the unyielding with acceptance, I am sure to find the right guidance. Again, this is in this, okay, you're not going to solve this problem. Let yourself be led to whatever will be the way out. Do not go forth blindly. Learn from the situation what is demanded of you, and then follow this intimation from fate. Which brings me to last night. And the first hexagram that came up was conflict. You are sincere and are being obstructed. A cautious halt halfway brings good fortune. Going through to the end brings misfortune. It furthers you to see the great wise one trusted by all who can mediate. Yeah, show me that. There is danger here, as success requires the concerted unity of forces. In other words, in the state of conflict, you can't try to go anywhere that can only be gotten to in a state of harmony, right? You try to go there in a state of conflict, and it's going to all be a mess. In times of strife, do not undertake great adventure. Do not cross the great water. The image of this is heaven and water go their opposite ways. The image of conflict. Thus, in all endeavors, the superior one carefully considers the beginning. The conflict is latent in the very shape of those two trigrams, so as soon as those trigrams come together, the conflict has already appeared in the beginning of that scene. Another shifting line then. To nourish oneself on ancient virtue induces perseverance. Danger, in the end, good fortune comes. This is warning of the danger that goes with an expansive disposition. That's a word that's translated out of the older Chinese. A tigger. Somebody like me who wants to, we can do that, has this danger built into it of overreaching that someone else might not be as prone to. Therefore, danger to be aware of, and at the same time, whatever you possess through the strength of your own nature cannot be lost. So I've referred to my character as this kind of sometimes overly expansive thing, but whatever in my character is well grounded and secure and honestly earned cannot be lost. whatever the external circumstances. I'll come back to that. One cannot engage in conflict. One turns back and submits to fate, changes one's attitude, and finds peace and perseverance. What these changing lines transform into, and this is the last of my 6 hexagrams. This is the last one of this series. Repair. Working on what has been spoiled. Isn't that interesting that the first one was difficult beginning and the last one is repair? This character represents a bowl in whose contents worms are breeding. Decay, stagnation. Due to a combination, and this is how the stagnation got this way, through a combination of gentle indifference, my slacker self, and rigid inertia, my judgmental, overreaching self, the stagnation and decay set in. This implies guilt, and the conditions demand for removal of the cause. Just as in those old myths, when there's a plague and pestilence in the land, you have to find out, hey, what's going on with this Oedipus guy? You know, where did this all come from? We got to solve this. The judgment, work on what has been spoiled, has supreme success. It furthers one to endeavor greatly to cross the great water. Before the starting point, 3 days. After the starting point, 3 days. What has been spoiled by our fault can be made good through our work. We must take hold energetically of work and of danger. Success also depends, however, on proper deliberation. It was 3 days before, 3 days after. In other words, it's not a rush into it and make things happen. It's this deliberative taking hold of that doesn't let go and moves forward resolutely. Decisiveness and energy must take the place of the inertia and indifference that have led to the decay in order that the ending may be followed by a new beginning. I love the image here too. The wind blows low on the mountain. The image of decay. Thus the superior one stirs up the people and strengthens their spirit. The superior one must regenerate society through the orderly sequence derived from these trigrams. They must first remove stagnation by stirring up public opinion as the wind stirs everything, and must then strengthen and tranquilize the character of these people as the mountain gives tranquility and nourishment to all that grows in its vicinity. And from the other commentary book, do not be afraid to take assertive action. Outside forces do not influence the situation. Your own past attitude has allowed the damage to occur, making you uniquely equipped to repair it. So this is what my unconscious connection with whatever there be brought me in this last 3 evenings, and I find several patterns in this interesting. In all 3 of those evenings, the first hexagram was verbally negative in the way that we would conceive it. Difficulty, darkening, and conflict. But all 3, beyond that what's led up to it in present situation, all 3 portend a positive. Influence, natural response, repair. And in the middle of all of those, Earth, on that second night of the 4 trigrams in those 2 hexagrams, 3 of the 4 were all yin, all Earth. Earth in the middle. And my takeaway from this for me is, it's easy for me to think of Father Sky, Mother Earth. It's easy for me to do a Jungian thing in the balance of, but I want to take this Earth literally. I want to take this in a really gritty, down-to-earth way. And I notice, in fact, as I was listening to, I made mixtapes, mixed CDs now for myself, and they're like a message in a bottle to my future self. So when I get these, I don't know where I'm going feelings, sometimes let me play that. One of my very baseline faith songs is by Stevie Wonder. And it's not, nobody's going to turn me around until I take off into space. And it's until I reach my higher ground. It's ground. It's higher ground. It is still earthy. That funky clavier and everything going on with Stevie Wonder, of course it's earthy. But I need to connect with that sense of earth. The pattern of resolution in all of these three cases is already there in the difficulty, in the disillusionment. In that, what's required is not, well, I'm going to blow my way through this. What's required is not the power of positive thinking. I recently read that there was a president who was thoroughly influenced by Norman Vincent Peale, that was this president's main influence. This Norman Vincent Peale even conducted this president's marriage. Guess what president that was? The power of positive thinking. A, Obama. B, Jimmy Carter. C, Donald Trump. Donald Trump. Donald Trump officiated the first of Trump's marriages. What's the reason that had significance for me is that when I reach to the register of what I think of as the law of attraction, when I reach to the register of connection with source energy and anything is possible, when I reach to that kind of super level thing, I'm going the opposite of what's indicated here by all that earth. And so, let me give some credit to somebody I don't always credit as being a good contrast for me to keep in mind here. I don't want to go where Donald Trump goes. If Joe Biden seems to have this many electoral votes, it was rigged. That's the power of positive thinking. I couldn't have lost, right? So for me, given that bent, the path is earthy, the path is yielding to allow myself to be led, to take things in their season. And it's important for me to look at those elements that have contributed to where the stagnation is. It's not an either or of resignation or enthusiasm. I love that. Take a step, make a connection, receive, allow. Importantly for me, where I am in a difficult censorship conflict stems partly from who I have been. To see faith differently, I need to be my faith differently. In short, to rediscover my faith, I have to grow. And so I want to leave you with some words that stuck in my head after decades of not being in my active memory at all. A hymn from 4th grade Sunday school. In the spirit of rediscovering my faith, these words bring me back to an innocent intention that resonated for me when I was in 4th grade. I would be true, for there are those who trust me. I would be pure, for there are those who care. I would be strong, for there is much to suffer. I would be brave, for there is much to dare. I would be brave, for there is much to dare. I would be friend of all, the foe, the friendless. I would be giving and forget the gift. I would be humble, for I know my weakness. I would look up and laugh and love and lift. I would look up and laugh and love and lift. Thank you.